Tonight, greetings, fellow travelers. As the week reaches its thrilling midpoint, we are broadcasting from the mountains of West Virginia. Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Let's Find Out with Diego. Bonus Overdrive Wednesday.
It's time to find out with Diego. Let's go. Ooh, yeah.
On this episode of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, our guest has experience as an educator, digital artist, and application developer. He's the author of Convoy 19, a thrilling book that plunges you into a world overrun by zombies, where the last remnants of humanity, civilian government and military leadership, band together to survive in a world overrun by zombies. All this plus more. Please welcome first-time guest and author of the book, Convoy 19, Mark Rivett. Mark, my friend, welcome to Bonus Overdrive Wednesday.
Happy to be here, Diego. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's one of those things that I love zombie anything.
Thank you. Me too.
It doesn't matter what it is, and I'm not saying this about your book, but even a bad zombie movie is a good zombie movie.
Sure.
Because you can have a lot of fun, because it always takes you like this kind of stuff. It's possible. I'm not saying with zombies, but things can go sideways at any time, and humanity will have to fight for its survival somehow.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the appeal of zombie novels or zombie stories is that idea that things have gone terrible, and you've got to just survive and off of a society, the framework that's no longer there. So I think every single person there's an appeal to apocalypse stories, and zombie apocalypse have a certain appeal to to folks that kind of speaks to the idea that something has gone wrong that allows this mindless like entity to proliferate throughout the world, and there's really no hope of recovering. And I think that appeals to a lot of people, or at least I hope it does.
I think it does, because it always gets one thinking, even when you're watching a horror movie. Not exactly, I'm not going to say like a ridiculous horror movie, but one like a slasher horror kind. Things like this could happen. You could be running for your life, and you always put yourself in that situation. But we're going to get into Convoy 19 here in a little bit. Now, because with your background in education, digital artist, and application developer, I'm trying to look and weave in and out of all these things and thinking, well, what inspired you to become an author? Because you're even the time that you have to invent time now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to, I've got a lot of interests. My professional interests are mostly the type of things that the world has decided that I have, that they want to pay me for. But my creative interests are, a lot of art and writing and stuff like that. I've been writing since I was a kid, and I wrote my first short story that was published in 2009. I busted out this novel in 2014, and I've always been a huge fan of horror, particularly zombie horror. I think one of my favorites, if not my favorite, zombie movie is, I think it's 2004, 2005's Dawn of the Dead, where it's a remake of the one where they're stuck in the mall. And that just is extremely well done. A lot of remakes are not well done, and that one is a very well done modern take on an old 1970s, 80s movie that kind of helps drive the genre forward in a way that helps kind of keep it alive.
And that was one of the things that you beat me to it. I was going to ask you the question. Being a young fan of horror and zombie movies, you mentioned one of your favorite ones. Do you have a favorite era of them? Because I know 70s was crazy with them, 80s. '90s was okay, and then just started picking right back up?
Oh, that is a good question. I like all zombie movies. I like the original Night of the Living Dead, black and white, fantastic. And I like that because it kind of just it gets into the story. There's no why, there's no how. It's just this is happening, deal with it, and that really is a good story. And and the little tangent here, and that is, I often kind of complain about modern media in that these, a lot of movies, I don't have time to see a movie because a lot of movies are 2.5, 3 hours, 3.5 hours long. I don't have time to go to a theater, sit down for that, invest that amount of time, and then get out of there. I have an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, and movies from the 80s and 90s, they were able to tell a story with no extraneous background, no this is why this character is that way. This is their life story. And now, boom, finally we're in the plot after being an hour into the movie. I like those older movies that they just hit the ground running and they kind of show, they slowly reveal like the characters over time, and they don't have to do this. With that said, I will give the Last of Us a lot of credit because they have done a lot of work to make the zombie apocalypse feel realistic, and in terms of how it could have happened with the way the mold, or I guess it's mold, was able to take control, and we're not zombies per se, but we're like mold zombies, I guess. Whereas a lot of other zombie stories don't really have that background. But so to answer your question, I like the older stuff, the shorter stuff, the concise, action-packed stuff. But there's some modern stuff that stands out, like Last of Us, for example.
And I do agree with you with sometimes the length of these movies. I know that you got to build, character development, and then there you have spin-offs where about a movie about this character right before this, and that's okay. But there's something about I can do a good 90 minutes of a well-told story.
Sure.
And if they want to do something else with it, like expand on the character, we can definitely move on with that. But I mean, if you want to get more bang for your buck, yeah, you can sit down for a 2.5 hour movie, but that's 2.5 hours I feel I might lose when I could be doing something myself. I know it sounds kind of rude, but it's just, I guess from people who want to create content or write books about the subject, you're kind of like, I want to go home and write now.
Yeah, for sure. And, it being able to tell a story in 60,000 words as opposed to 120,000 words or something like that. And, I'm sorry to keep dovetailing on this subject, but my wife and I put on Usual Suspects last night. How long do you think that movie is? Like so much story is told, and you think, oh, that's a 2.5 hour movie. It's an hour and 45 minutes. Back to the Future, hour and 20 minutes. Like these stories, these classic stories, they're short, concise, to the point, and that is what I like about some of the older stuff.
Yeah, you could always do sequels, which I'm okay with.
Sure.
I'm a little burned out with prequels. I'm like, just make that first and let's move forward. Because I tell you this, because I saw when Lord of the Rings first came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty long movie. Even for the movie theater version where you're not getting the full extended director's cut, or the film they cut and went up on the floor and they sewed it back on version, things like that. I then forgot about the whole thing. I had to watch it 2 or 3 times. So I couldn't do it.
No. Yeah. In what you're touching on is a classic example, like The Hobbit children's book. That book is like 90 pages long, maybe 70, and they busted out 9 hours of movies, like for real. Like, come on now, like that is like who are you trying to, like, who's that for? Like, it's not for like the 12-year-old who's like read The Hobbit for the first time and now he wants to watch Lord of the Rings. I guess it's for some executive who wants people to sit in the movie theaters for 3 times 3 hours.
Yeah, and I don't think, and I might be aging myself, man, because when there were some long movies, I believe, what movie was it? I think like Dr. Zhivago, right?
Mhm.
Or some movies back in the day were a little bit lengthy. They used to have intermissions in the movie theaters.
Sure. Yeah.
Now you can't, man. You better hold it.
No, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the last long movie it was just last night. I watched one of the spinoffs for John Wick, Ballerina.
Yeah.
Pretty decent. I liked
Yeah.
it. It's got a lot of legs to it. I think they can make some more with that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, well, we're going into the world of zombies because there's so many variations of how you can tell their story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can do full length or you can do them shorter.
Sure.
I think it depends on the type of world that you create. And that's what I'm talking about with your background as an educator, digital artist, and, of course, an application developer. Now, how do these different areas of expertise influence the creation of the world building in Convoy 19?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I am, like I said, I wear a lot of hats. I guess it's because I probably spend my life in front of a computer. Like I, what is the name of every aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy? And Google it, find out. And how do you? What's this part of Los Angeles? It's in the book. In the book, the aircraft carrier is USS Ronald Reagan, which is in the Pacific Fleet. And then what is a good neighborhood in L.A. and it's the Terra Santa neighborhood. I just spend my life in front of Google, like asking questions, like what's and like, it's kind of nice because I'm sure previous authors didn't have that, like Mark Twain, writing whatever, he had to kind of go to a library, I guess, to find out the answer to the questions that he wanted to ask. But just taking this information, this really interesting information, and compiling it into a story that I really like. And zombie stories, they're horror, but they're also action. And so getting the idea of how action would play out realistically, and for I'll give you examples. The classic, zombies can only be killed by a headshot, which is the case in my story. And I like that because if you're dead, you don't have blood going through your body that carries oxygen to your vital organs. How hard is a headshot? Like, is that something you could do at like 10 feet? 20 feet, 30 feet, this thing's running at you, like, and I try and communicate how tricky some of the stuff would be in real life. If you're in a action scene, and plenty of movies and stories where action heroes doing headshots left, right, and sideways, that's all you can do. You can never even miss, and that's hard. Like, yeah. you're not if you've ever been to a shooting range and you've whether it's a rifle or a pistol tried to make a headshot at even 10 meters, that's not an easy shot. Now try and make that shot at a moving target screaming at you with 30 other things around you. Like, doesn't matter what you got, what kind of like how well armed you are, like you got to get out of there because you're not going to win that fight. And that's kind of something I like to communicate in my story. The difficulty of the realism of the system.
You're absolutely correct. I could not disagree with what you just said. Now, sidetrack a little bit. I once had a career where every year I had to requalify for firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And the nervousness, not only are you shooting to keep your job and a paycheck and not be kicked out, but there are some real world scenarios where sometimes these targets move towards you,
sure,
or you have 2 seconds to get 3 rounds from your holster out. You can make a headshot, but I think the percentage with your adrenaline at the same time, the percentage goes down. And that's a very smart observation because, I mean, I see stuff all the time. It's like, how do the gun was sideways and a perfectly good shot to the head, or
Right.
I was like, I love Hollywood.
Right, sure. Yeah, we all love that idea that there's this marksman could do that, but that's not real. I mean, that's why soldiers are trained to hit center mass. You get a bullet in your vital organs, like you're done. But zombies don't have vital organs, so you might be able to slow them down.
No, yeah, just enough to get away. But now, which brings me to now, easy headshots. If you're a fan of Highlander, you take the sword and cut the head off. You're good to go. You don't even have to be that great of an aim. Just swing.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, that's tricky though too, because you might be able to use a sword or an axe or something like that, and get a zombie or two, but you got 10 around you, like all coming at you. Like what's the character Michonne from Walking Dead, and she's awesome. Like you love her. She's got the sword and can kick ass with it, but and the numbers are really on the zombie side there, and you gotta get out of Dodge.
Yeah, because even with a lighter sword, you're gonna run out of juice, man. You're gonna be tired swinging that thing. Even baseball players get tired of swinging a bat. So
yeah.
But I mean, it's all part of the fun, really. And let's talk about some of the characters in Convoy 19, because you have civilians, you have military, and government. On whose perspective is this book from?
So this is a multi-perspective novel. Think about kind of Game of Thrones, where the story comes from a variety of different characters' perspective, and it all kind of culminates into one perspective by the end of the story. The main characters are Carl Harvey is a Sergeant First Class Carl Harvey. He's a driver. Well, he's not a driver. He's of a rank where he would be driven in the military, but he chooses not to be driven because it takes up space in his Humvee for a potential passenger he's trying to rescue. And he's the leader of a group of 5 Humvees that their job has been in the recent months to shuffle survivors who they build all these fortresses all around the city and outside the city, and for months these convoys have been collecting survivors and supplies from these fortresses and shepherding to the remnants of the U.S. fleet, well, not the remnants, but the U.S. naval fleet off the coast of San Diego. And the heart of the story is this leader who's driving his convoy through these dangerous situations. There's the classic hints at the classic story. The man's biggest enemy is man himself. Despite the zombies, there's always people trying to take advantage, trying to look for an angle. So that's his story. There is another story, Dr. Henry D'Amico. He is a former, I forget exactly his title, but he was former Secretary of Health and Human Services, which was divided into different districts across the United States. And he was in charge of District 12, I think, is the easternmost one. And his job is to figure out how we're going to live on a fleet of aircraft carriers and ships and stuff like that. What are we going to do? How are we going to get food? How long do we have to live on the supplies we have? Where are we going to go? So that's his job. But he is distracted because his wife, another perspective character, was in charge of one of these fortresses, and she's on the mainland, and she's trying to keep people alive and trying to keep the place secure, Dr. Miko has a tough choice in that he has the authority to send this convoy to go get his wife, but is that really the right thing to do with the resources that he has at hands? And ultimately, a little spoiler is ultimately the answer is yes. His wife is also a doctor and very valuable in terms of her knowledge, and there's also other people at this protection center that need to be rescued. So it is a worthwhile effort, but the effort is costly. It doesn't go off, easily. You got to travel through a densely populated city with tons of zombies running at your vehicles. And one of my favorite, kind of thoughts that I have in terms of why can't a Humvee just plow through a bunch of zombies? And the answer is there's lots of reasons. And if you ever hit a deer, even in a truck, if you ever hit a deer and you know what a deer does to a truck, it's not good. Now imagine 400 pounds, 2 people. Imagine 1,000 pounds, 5 people. Now imagine 50 people or 200 people all getting smashed into by your Humvee. Yeah, your Humvee's tough, but the amount of damage that's going to happen to your vehicle as it gets, as this press of formerly human flesh is against you, it's going to wear you down. So you can't just plow your way through. You've got to be smart, and you've got to use strategy in order to get to and from where you're trying to get to. And that's kind of the gist of the story of the characters.
No, that's beautiful, because I'm picturing it in my mind. Even if let's say you manage to get an armored truck or a Humvee or something, you could tack it out, put all this and that. After a while, you could have so much blood and guts inside the engine and inside the wheels, and it's going to get all wrapped up with the guts and all that stuff. Eventually, that truck ain't going to go nowhere.
Yeah. Even the mud and blood and gore, they function pretty similarly when they're under a wheel of a vehicle, no matter what that vehicle is. So,
absolutely. And those who've ever brings me back to my cousin Vinny. You got mud in your tire. What do you mean you got mud in my tire? Car's not spinning; it's just spinning out. It's not getting out. Yeah. So similar. I don't know how I even got to my cousin Vinny, but it's the first thing I thought about.
Yeah.
No, and it's been my observations with a lot of similar movies, because it's not just zombie apocalypse movies, because you also had similar movies and shows with even extraterrestrial invasions. Mm-hmm. One that pops to mind, which one of my favorite sci-fi shows ever, Falling Skies, similar to where aliens come, humans fight for survival, and there's also sort of politicking and different factions. But sometimes the biggest monsters aren't the monsters themselves, but they're other factions, other people fighting for resources. Do we see some of these kind of things also come into play in your book?
Yeah, the primary, there's kind of 2 areas where you're going to see that. And the first is within the fleet. And there's a leadership that is, it's ostensibly run by former elected representatives who've managed to survive and be rescued, and they retain their office. But obviously, the U.S. government's no longer functioning in the way that it was before. So there's kind of actually a brief reference to, okay, at some point we're gonna have to hold elections, but we are trying to survive right now. So these folks have different opinions about how resources should be allocated and how what should be done and should and shouldn't be done next. And kind of one major theme within the book is the kind of disregard for expertise that a lot of people have, and that is Dr. D'Amico, who knows very well what he's doing and trying to keep people alive, and has to deal with privileged, representatives who, for whatever reason, think there's infinite resources that they can be spent on whatever, and infinite time, and their lives aren't actually in danger. And they have to be reminded that your life is in danger, and there's a very narrow amount of people between you and being overrun and killed. So respect that at least, but also the expertise that's keeping you alive, keeping you fed, keeping you like water, like you can't drink ocean water, but you've got to keep that in mind. The second area where there's kind of political vying is more on the micro level, where at one point the convoy arrives at one of these facilities, and it's run by like jointly run by a doctor and a sergeant, and they are in agreement with what needs to be done next. And again, a bit of a spoiler here is they're in agreement that the children need to be evacuated from the facility, but the people who are in that facility, the adults, they want to ride out too. And they in the third part is this. Carl Harvey has orders where he's only supposed to get the supplies. He's not supposed to get anything. He's not supposed to take any passengers. His job is to get the supplies only. And so it's a real quandary. I won't tell you how that story ends, but you are ordered to do something, and it's to take the supplies from these people who are trapped in this defensive bunker. The right thing to do might be to take those kids out and get them to the fleet, but then you're leaving a bunch of supplies behind. But then there's also tons of other people, parents of these kids. They want to ride out, and people who were ordered to go to this facility for their own safety months and months ago, and they expect to ride out. They expect that they're going to be getting out of here, and the reality is there isn't enough resources to get everyone out. And so how do you manage that conflict?
Stress builds, man.
What's
stress
that?
Builds for everybody. The stress builds with everybody involved in this horrific scene that they're in, and everybody's fighting for survival. And of course, sometimes the me first will come in.
Yeah.
Do I want you to live? Do I want to live? These are things that people will have to think about, and with their own whatever moral compass they use. And in the world of zombies, and you and I, we just now met. I don't know where you're coming from or your belief system, but a couple things. There are some things that can be akin to being zombified in our common time, to where if you follow a voodoo path, or I think depending on where in the world, where they extract some sort of serum or something in the pufferfish that puts people in a catatonic state of some sorts, for use for religious rituals, whatever. I don't know enough about it, but I know there's something to that. Going back about 8 to 10 years ago, within 10 years ago, there was a couple cases, but one I would say is New York. But I'm sorry for my New York listeners. I don't want to blame anybody for anything, but there was an event where a person consumed bath salts, and they were later found to attack somebody, eat their face, cannibalize them while they were alive. And of course, I think he shot dead and got him somehow. Somebody said, well, he was kind of like in a zombie state, because that would be the only reason something like that would happen. If humanity reaches this unfortunate event, how do you think it would happen? How would we all be turning into zombies? Are we talking like a Fauci thing? Are we talking about a military thing, or paranormal?
In my book, and I don't go too deep into the whys because I think that that's unnecessary. But in my author's mind, and it is referenced briefly in the story, the idea is that there's, kind of the classic virus that you all catch. But this virus is not transmitted by bites, although if you get bitten, it's accelerated. There is a condition, and I'm not exactly, pardon me, it's been a while since I've researched this, but there are dormant viruses in us all the time. And there are viruses that our ancestors have passed down to us for thousands and thousands of years that that they exist in us, and they're not malicious. They don't hurt us. Our immune system is able to take care of them, and in many cases, they're symbiotic. In my world, the virus is in all of us already, and if you die, it doesn't matter how you die, you're going to be a zombie at this point. And the reason for why that's happening now, as opposed to previously, is not known. Like, they don't understand why it's happening. But it is a dormant virus that exists in all of us. And there is nothing you can do to stop a person from rising as the dead unless you destroy their brain, or pulverize them, I guess, is the only other thing you could do. But that's how it happens in my story. And that's kind of my zombie world view is how that would happen.
And I appreciate the answer, because when I asked, I was like, man, I hope I'm not spoiling this for the listeners, and I want to download a copy of Convoy 19. But I appreciate you answering that. It sounds awesome. Now, for the listeners of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday that want to get themselves a physical or a downloaded version of Convoy 19, where can they go?
So they can get it on Amazon. My partner, my publisher, Zombie Media Publishing, has an Amazon link. I hope you can provide it to your listeners. But it looks like you can get both a Kindle edition and paperback and audiobook available on Amazon.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate you giving us that information. I appreciate you being on the show. And man, I tell you, I know you probably have a few more books left in you. Are you working on anything?
Yeah. So the next zombie story that I'm writing, and again, I've had a couple of kids, so it's a little difficult to sit down and find time to write. But it's set in the same world, but in Pittsburgh, which is where I lived for 20 years before moving back to Michigan. And it's similar. This is how zombies came to be. Same scenario, but because Pittsburgh is much more inland than Convoy 19, they don't have military prioritizing their evacuation, so they're basically on their own. And that story explores kind of something I've been interested in a while, is that what happens with the breakdown of resources that you don't really think of. And here's an example. Couple of examples. I have terrible heartburn. I have medicine for it, and I take it, and if I don't take it, then I'm going to go to bed, and I'm going to be waking up every 15 minutes. What happens when my medicine's gone? I can't get access to it. I'm going to be in absolute suffering agony. Similarly, about a quarter of the U.S. population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And what happens when they can't get their insulin, or what happens when they can't get their diabetic maintenance or the pre-diabetic maintenance medication? What is going through a diabetic's head when the zombie apocalypse hits, and they've survived, they're holed up in their house, they got 30 days of insulin. What do they do? Or there's all kinds of other things that happen, like your congenital heart failure. You have medicine to manage heart failure. You're all kinds of different, you're in the middle of chemotherapy for a cancer that would normally be easily treated. Cancer that stops. It's a really bleak exploration of what the apocalypse really means for our society in terms of our health, and what would happen to us without those struts that we don't really see, and how those the kind of adds to the desperation of a otherwise action-packed survival story.
Man, that's a great glimpse into the future of this book. Now, do you have a working title?
It's the working title is based off an old short story I wrote many years ago called Mercy. It's an homage to Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh, which it's a good, great hospital. And, but it's also kind of talking about like what does it mean to give mercy, and in an apocalyptic world where people are dying of not just zombie outbreaks, but all the other things that we actually keep us alive that we don't really actually realize.
And when that book eventually comes out, I would love to have you come back and
Sure.
talk about it on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The book Convoy 19, published by Zombie Media Publishing, available on Amazon on both physical, audio, and on the Kindle version. My friend, thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to having you back again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope to be on again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
All content on this broadcast is a property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The information shared on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.